Amazing moment. Cleaner.'s surprising revelation at the altar exposes Millionaire's true colors. Jessica tightened her grip around the edge of the grand table as her eyes roamed the opulent hall, a whirlwind of flickering candles and crystalline chandeliers that dripped with diamonds. The scent of fresh lilies overwhelmed her senses, a stark contrast to the familiar aroma of her modest apartment. She was just a cleaner, a 27-year-old with hands stained by years of hard work. And yet, here in the lavish space decorated for Mark's wedding, the world was transformed into a glittering dream that left her scrambling for a sense of belonging. As she fluffed the white linens, the vibrant buzz of voices pricked at her ears. The laughter of wealthy guests echoed, each sound magnifying her insecurities, making her feel like a ghost haunting a world she was never meant to inhabit. She could feel the weight of judgment looming, felt the eyes on her as if she were a broken piece of art among a gallery of masterpieces. But in the midst of her turmoil, Alice, the seasoned florist, brought her small comforts amidst the chaos. "Your hard work shines as bright as those chandeliers, Jessica," Alice said warmly. Her weathered hands delicately arranged peonies, as if painting a canvas with colors of resilience. "Never underestimate the power of your effort." Jessica smiled, appreciating Alice's kindness, yet her heart raced as she glanced around the room. Every twanging note of laughter and clinking glass reminded her of her own modest beginnings, her father's relentless work to create a better life that had left them with nothing but memories. As guests mingled, discussions of yachts, distant vacations, and exotic experiences filled the air, a language she didn't speak. And then, in moments of hushed whispers, she caught the words family legacy and tarnished. Her skin prickled, awareness crashing over her the irony of wealth and the silent cost that accompanied it. Jessica's breath hitched when she realized the truth behind Mark's family's fortune rooted in her father's struggling company that had ultimately been devoured by theirs. Jealousy and rage churned within her, tightening the muscles in her chest. How dare they? She thought, every syllable wrapping around her integrity. They wore masks of charm, as if luxury could absolve the price paid for their success. Mark's laugh echoed a rich, mocking sound that would forever haunt her as the face of entitlement. Just as vows were about to be exchanged, an internal storm roared within Jessica, a crescendo of emotions coalescing into a singular, piercing question. Should she voice the truth or remain an invisible servant in the presence of those who took so much? She felt David's ghost beside her, the man whose sacrifices went unnoticed, invisible like her in this dazzling set, urging her to act. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As Mark stood at the altar, ready to commit to his fairy tale, Jessica felt the weight of her father's memories pressing down on her. Each word exchanged between the bride and groom clarified the stark divide between their realities. She caught Alice's eye across the hall, fear and encouragement shimmering in her gaze, blurring the lines of doubt. In that charged atmosphere, Jessica knew this was her moment. The consequences could shake the very foundation of her existence. Yet the truth hung heavily in the air, as palpable as the flowers around her. As apprehension clawed her throat, she could almost hear her father's voice whispering, urging her to reclaim the dignity. Lost, to confront the tide of privilege as their laughter echoed in the frigid hall. What would happen if she stepped forward? Would she be ostracized or finally recognized? Her resolve sparked, but so did her terror. With a sharp intake of breath, Jessica willed her legs to move forward. The gilded hall, with its lavish decor, suddenly felt far too constrictive. The heavy silence of the collective gaze bore down on her, a mix of anticipation and judgment. She was no longer just a cleaner. She was a vessel of truth about Mark and the wealth that overshadowed her family's legacy. Each step was a battle against the trepidation clawing at her insides. What would it feel like to disrupt the carefully curated narrative of wealth and privilege? At that moment, the faces blurred, and all she saw was her father's, a reflection of hard work and integrity betrayed by those who had plenty but valued little. She remembered the late nights he spent at the kitchen table, exhaustion etched in his face, determined to provide for her. The rage evolved from jealousy into a righteous determination as she envisioned the life he sacrificed for her sacrifices that had gone unnoticed in this pristine environment. As she approached the altar, Mark's smile frozen in time, she caught glimpses of the murmurings among the guests' curiosity battling with disbelief at her audacity. They'd taken her father's company. They had feasted on the fruits of a dream that was never theirs to enjoy. There was a momentary flicker of uncertainty. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks and the stakes reverberating in her heart. The specter of ridicule danced at the edges of her consciousness, urging her to retreat. But the weight of the truth pulled her forward. Jessica, the voice that broke through the tension, was calm and steady. Alice, "You got this. The truth needs to be heard." The look in her eyes conveyed a lifetime of wisdom, the kind forged through hardship and perseverance. With that one encouraging statement, it solidified her resolve. Her voice might tremble with vulnerability, but she would no longer allow her father's sacrifices to be overshadowed by someone who had inherited everything on a silver platter. Then she heard her own voice, a surprising clarity swirling around her declaration. "I need to speak." The words were like a fire igniting within, burning down walls of uncertainty. The collective gasp was palpable. Eyes widened, some in shock, others in excitement. Her heart raced as she continued. "This isn't just about another wedding celebration. It's about honor and justice, the cost of this wealthy empire built on the back of hard labor and broken dreams." The room shifted as every syllable echoed off the lavish walls. Jessica saw shifting expressions. Some guests looked horrified, while others began to lean in, captivated by the complexity of her admission. Never had she experienced such raw honesty. It filled the air like sweet nectar, intoxicating and liberating. She was no longer an invisible servant. She had reclaimed her voice, even if for just a moment. But as the words hung in the air, the thrill of her revelation clashed with the pervasive undercurrent of intimidation. Mark's expression morphed into a mask of anger, disbelief clashing with entitlement. Every glance at his fiancée showed disapproval, and a trace of embarrassment shadowed his brows. With a pounding heart, Jessica realized that she had entered a battleground, a confrontation brewing beneath the surface of this grand affair. This would not simply end with her outburst. The repercussions could ripple through her life like a stone cast into still water. Did she have the strength to withstand the storm she had unleashed? A sudden ripple of discontent surged amongst the guests, their whispers flickering like the candles swaying on the elegant tables. A new layer of tension unfurled, and Jessica braced herself for the inevitable confrontation with Mark, with wealth, with her own fears. What would she face when the applause faded and judgment came roaring back? Would she stand her ground, or would the weight of their wealth suffocate her once more? The moment of reckoning approached, dark and undeniable. As Jessica stood there, the air thick with disbelief, the reality of what she had done began to sink in. The room that had once seemed suffocating now felt like an arena, surrounded by faces etched with surprise, distaste, and some, surprisingly, with admiration. She sensed an undeniable shift. A part of her craved the safety of anonymity, but that desire was now eclipsed by the flames of courage ignited by her earlier words. Mark's face contorted, shifting rapidly between anger and disbelief. There was a moment of stillness, where time itself seemed to pause, suspended by the weight of her truth. She had turned from an invisible shadow of the lavish affair to a vibrant vessel of revelation. But with this newfound visibility came the chilling realization that she was now a target. Had she truly prepared herself for the consequences of her declaration? She caught Alice's eyes across the room, and for the briefest second, they shared an understanding. Alice's presence was grounding, a silent reminder that she was not alone. Yet, the gravity of the confrontation ahead loomed perilously. The whispers from the guests swirled around her, an involuntary murmur that grew bolder as the seconds passed. Would they rally around her audacity or condemn her for tarnishing their idealized evening? Jessica's internal turmoil clashed harshly with her external resolve. She noticed the trembling in her hands, a physical manifestation of her fear. Was she prepared to face the man who had unwittingly placed her on this path? The prospect of a fight was exhilarating yet terrifying, and she needed to gather every ounce of composure she could muster. "Jessica," Mark began, his voice strained and incredulous. "You can't just walk in here and know, Mark." Her voice rang out, firmer than she anticipated. A twinge of surprise shot through her at her own certainty. "I won't let you distort the truth. People deserve to know how the empire you've built rests on the hard work and sacrifices of others." His eyes flared, flashes of indignation and contempt replacing the disbelief. "You think you understand anything about my life, or what my family has built?" His tone dripped with condescension, causing a flicker of self-doubt to spark within her. But she was done apologizing for being who she was. Slashing through the tension thick as fog, Jessica pressed on. "I know plenty. I know what my father represented, and I know the toil that built this place." As she spoke, she felt the transformation unfold within her, a blend of vulnerability and an emerging strength that formed an unexpected resolve. There was no turning back. The truth had unfurled, and it was as if a protective layer encased her, shielding her from their scorn. The guests were leaning in now, some members nodding almost imperceptibly, others eyeing Mark with conflicted expressions. The dynamics of the room were changing, but would it be enough? Would the tide of this banquet shift as the applause faded away, leading to her eventual isolation or celebration? Just then, a voice cut through the tension. Unmistakably familiar, it was Alice again. "Keep going, Jessica. They need to hear every word." The approval in Alice's tone sent a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. In that moment, bolstered by her friend's encouragement, she realized that she was not merely confronting Mark or the opulence surrounding her. She was battling for her own identity, a quest to reclaim everything her father had imbued in her spirit. But as her resolve seemed unshakable, a shadow loomed over her emerging confidence. How far would she truly go to deliver her message? And at what cost? The conflict within her burgeoned as revelations of their hidden truths clawed at her conscience. The room seemed to hold its breath, and Jessica felt the pivotal choice before her pulse with urgency. Would she allow the truth to sweep her away into obscurity, or could this moment galvanize her into becoming the person she was meant to be? As she prepared to lay bare the layers of deception, Jessica caught a glimpse of the future ahead, vast and uncertain, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Would this defining moment serve as the catalyst to claim her own narrative, or would the repercussions obliterate the courage she had only just begun to realize? The next words were crucial. The chance to rewrite her story hung in balance as she faced the gaping maw of doubt just waiting to devour her self-belief. Jessica took a deep breath, her heart pounding fiercely against her ribcage. She felt as if the air had thickened around her, making every inhale a battle, yet she stood resolute. Mark's confused anger had ignited a new spark within her, a flicker of empowerment she hadn't anticipated. The whispers of the guests swelled, and she realized that even the disapproval from those around her couldn't blanket the undeniable truth she was about to unveil. "Mark, you continue to disguise your privilege as hard work. That's the real deception," she said, punctuating her words with a fierceness she'd never known she possessed. She sensed how her tone shifted the atmosphere, transforming it from a mere gathering into a powerful stage where honesty would reign supreme. She felt the weight of eyes upon her, some laden with judgment, others sparking curiosity. It was intoxicating, this feeling of being seen. But the specter of doubt still lingered, clawing at her insides, weaving itself into her thoughts. What if she not only faced Mark's wrath, but also alienated those who once regarded her with kindness? Do you really think that by airing these grievances, you're achieving anything? Mark shot back, regaining some control. His voice dripped with condescension, and his eyes narrowed into slits as if he had just been challenged at a game he believed he could never lose. This is a display of immaturity, a desperate grab for attention. The accusation gripped her, sending a jolt of apprehension through her body. She grappled with the temptation to backtrack, to soften her stance, and mask her discontent rather than face the brutal honesty unfolding in front of her. But beneath the encroaching fear lay something deeper, an unwavering determination that was building momentum every time she defied his presumptions. Sometimes, Mark, the truth itself is the only attention worth seeking, she declared, pushing through the labyrinth of doubt that surrounded her. The conviction in her voice surprised even her. There was the flicker of empowerment ignited by small victories of self-assertion. Shatter the silence by revealing the secrets buried beneath opulence. Jessica could see Alice among the guests. The unwavering support in her friend's eyes buoyed her resolve. It was as if Alice was silently urging her on, a guiding force in a tumultuous sea. Was it possible that her desire to reveal the truth stemmed from a deeply rooted need for validation, not just for herself, but for all those overlooked and undervalued? With every word, Jessica scratched the surface of her own identity, unearthing layers she hadn't recognized before. Who was she, if not the daughter, chiseling away at the shadow her family name cast? Was she simply a voice shouting into the void? Or could she transcend beyond that into something empowering, something transformative? Your wealth and status do not grant you the right to trample over others, Mark. The burden of her past began to dissolve, each syllable striking like a hammer against a chisel. You exist within this illusion, insulated from the realities faced by hardworking people like my father. It's time someone brought this to light. With each passing moment, the room vibrated with tension, electric with anticipation. Would they side with Mark, the emblem of success, or rally behind her, the unyielding voice stirred by injustice? The lines were drawn sharply now, influencing her fetal battle with insecurity and identity. The realization that she was here, confronting her past and that of others, left her feeling both exhilarated and terrified. She sensed the imminent liberation that lay just ahead, but also the weight of alienation she might endure. Would the reward of authenticity justify the risks involved? Stop while you can, Jess, Mark hissed, his eyes boring into her, attempting to pry apart her newfound courage. There was a flicker of fear behind his bravado, a realization that she held power that rattled the foundations of his carefully constructed world. But could she truly wield this power? In that instant, she understood. The truth, while liberating, could also breed resentment and hostility. How deeply was she willing to pierce the veil? In her quest for liberation, was she prepared to face the chaos it unleashed? The question hung heavy, imbued with an urgency that demanded an answer. As the atmosphere shifted like the tide, she continued, bolstered by the culmination of self-awareness brewing within her. Would this moment mark the beginning of her true self emerging, or would it separate her from everything she once knew? A thrilling yet worrisome uncertainty loomed as the next words needed to solidify her fate. Hold on, she thought, determination knitting her brows. The next move defines it all. Jessica felt the charged energy in the air pulsate around her as silence descended, thick and tangible. Each breath she took was a border she hovered upon. One side led to a familiar path lined with expectations, the other to an uncharted territory brimming with potential. The intensity of the moment was almost unbearable, her heart racing faster with each second. As she gazed into Mark's eyes, she could see the discomfort rapidly morphing into fury. They narrowed dangerously, like a predator cornered. But somewhere within that rage, she discerned a flicker of uncertainty, a momentary crack in his armor where her words could seep through. She felt like a moth dancing towards the light, oblivious to the impending danger. "Why don't you tell them the truth?" Mark spat, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You think you're some kind of hero? This is just a pitiful attempt to gain sympathy by tearing someone down. You're better than this, Jessica." His words scraped against her composure. But instead of retreating into self-doubt, anger flared up in her chest, a righteous heat that demanded expression. "No, Mark," she countered, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm not tearing you down. I'm showing everyone what you've built your life upon. Deceit cloaked as effort, privilege masquerading as meritocracy. This isn't about sympathy. It's about justice." A powerful wave of disbelief washed over the crowd. Some faces reflected shock, others resignation. But the most gripping reaction came from Alice, who clasped her hands together almost in prayer, her eyes glinting with resolve. Her friend's steadfastness fed into Jessica's courage, a pulse of simplicity amidst the chaos. Jessica confronted the space around her, feeling the physical weight of the audience pressing in, forcing her to be bolder. What if she had the opportunity to redefine her role? No longer the obedient daughter, content in her world but never fully belonging. Instead, the architect crafting her own identity. "Your actions," she said, clutching her fists at her sides, "have consequences. You've built this illusion on the backs of people you've dismissed. I'm here to make sure that the pain you've caused isn't silenced anymore." A slight tremor of exhilaration swept through her as newfound self-acceptance emerged, a certainty nestling within her marrow. Who would she be if she remained quiet? Would her silence ultimately serve the complacent world she was trying to leave behind? The realization that she could write her narrative gripped her. The burden of expectations from her family, the pressure of perceived inadequacies, all felt lighter with each raw declaration. Jessica understood the fullness of her truth could birth not just her liberation, but also a change in narrative for many trapped in shadows. People are tired of separate worlds colliding only to dissolve when the lights flicker on, she continued, willing herself to let anger be the ember that ignited her fire. They want to know. They need the truth. It's time for those in power to answer for their actions. Emotion layered her voice, intensifying her resolve. But fear nagged at the fray of her thoughts. What if pushing this truth led her to alienation? She shuddered at the weight of isolation that might accompany her boldness. Yet, isn't vulnerability also a strength? Perhaps true connections could only arise from authenticity. Fate is an unpredictable force, she thought, heart-pounding. Every path diverging creates a friction of force that can elevate or destroy. Risking vulnerability was now necessary. Mark, thrown off kilter, approached uncertainty himself. His hands curled into fists, and for the first time, Jessica could see him wrestling with the chaos her revelation was inciting. The ground beneath her felt like a springboard. She stood on the precipice of transformation, her breath catching in her throat as anticipation surged. "Mark," she said, leaning into the moment. "It's time to face the music." As the last words hung heavy with implication, she felt the irrevocable shift. Would her voice resonate as a rallying call, or would it falter amidst resistance? The next moments measured not just her resolve, but could redefine everything she hoped for. As Mark's expression shifted from anger to something colder, Jessica braced herself. The true confrontation was about to begin. Jessica's heart drummed thunderously, punctuating the charged silence that had fallen like a shroud over the assembly. She felt every gaze on her, 1,000 expectations mingling with the weight of her fears, but she wouldn't back down. The moment hung pregnant with potential a crossroad she could not afford to bypass. Mark's expression transformed again, his eyes narrowing into slits. The flicker of uncertainty was replaced by steely resolve. You think this makes you brave? All you've done is embarrass yourself. Think they care about your sob story? His voice dripped with ridicule. But Jessica sensed the walls closing in around him. Perhaps the mask of confidence he wore was fraying before her eyes. No, Mark, she replied, her tone unwavering as adrenaline surged. This isn't about sympathy. This is about dismantling the facade you've leaned on for too long. Your empire built on lies is collapsing, and I'm merely providing the final breath of truth it needs. She saw several heads nodding in the crowd, a silent agreement that kindled a flame of encouragement within her. Each affirmation fortified her words. Perhaps there was a community here, one yearning for acknowledgement and validation. Like a web, their collective energy fused with her determination, urging her onward. I didn't understand my voice until now, Jessica thought, the clarity electrifying every fiber of her being. Recently, she had always been the hesitant observer, navigating life with apprehension. But here, standing before her peers, a shift occurred. The internal narrative she had harbored for too long was evolving. Desire surged, battling against a haunting question: what if her outspokenness backfired and isolated her completely? But a deeper question plucked at the strings of her resolve. What kind of life would it be to silence herself to fit into someone else's expectation? Jessica offered herself a fierce reply. It would be a life half-lived, chained to whims and judgments. No more. With this renewed sense of purpose, Jessica pressed on. It's not just about you, Mark. It's about every person who felt overlooked, every friend you've abandoned in the pursuit of your self-serving goals. A breath caught in her throat, yet she steadied herself. Unspoken struggles floated through her mind, faces and stories she would honor by taking this stand. In the crowd, Alice's features softened into a knowing smile, radiating a warmth that buoyed Jessica's spirit. This is for all of us, Jessica thought, eyes scanning their faces, her classmates, her friends, even those whose passions had long been extinguished by the weight of privilege. Mark recoiled as if struck, the armor he had built slowly rattling around him. She sensed his vulnerability like a live wire, electrifying the air between them. Stop hiding behind your wealth, Mark. It doesn't grant you immunity from justice. Each lie has consequences, and it's time you face them. With those words, the dam she had been constructing around her own insecurities began to crack. A realization spread through her, exhilarating yet terrifying. The confrontation could be the catalyst of her growth. But would it catalyze a fracture or reconciliation with the world she wished to redefine? As she prepared to speak again, Jessica saw a shift occurring. The crowd was rapt, and for the first time, Mark looked unsure. The facade of invincibility was faltering. She needed to seize this moment, yet a nagging doubt crept back in. Was she risking everything for a fight she might not win? Mark, Jessica continued, her voice steady despite the quiver of her heart. Your narrative doesn't just affect you. It undermines us all, the choices we make, the ethics we uphold. I'm here to reclaim my story and hold you accountable for yours. Are you ready to engage in this truth? As silence encroached upon them, anticipation curled in Jessica's chest, melding with fear. What awaited her after this confrontation? Would she find solidarity among allies or be scapegoated and pushed aside? In that moment, the world opened up. A raw, electrifying prospect tightened around her, imbued with possibility. She stood poised at the edge of transformation, aware that everything hung in the balance. The next words she spoke would shape her path forever. And just as she prepared to continue, an unmistakable voice echoed from the back. Jessica, wait. You have to hear this. The crowd turned, energy shifting as curiosity peaked. A new layer of tension was added, the spotlight now suddenly brighter. Jessica's heart thudded. What revelation would follow, and how would it impact her fight? Jessica felt her breath catch as she turned towards the source of the voice. The anticipation in the air hummed with a raw intensity, her heart racing. Unsure whether this unexpected turn would be the salvation she desperately sought or a derailing moment that could fracture everything she had just built. The crowd parted slightly, and she saw a young woman stepping forward, someone she recognized but had never truly spoken to. Clara, one of the cleaning staff at the venue, stood before them, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Her hands wrung together, betraying a nervous energy that echoed Jessica's own. "Jessica," Clara began, her voice shaking yet determined. "I've worked here for years, cleaning up after events like this, hearing conversations no one else hears. You're right about Mark. I can't stand by anymore." The vulnerability in Clara's statement gave Jessica strength, a buoyancy that lifted her spirit. Swallowing her own fear, Jessica nodded encouragingly. "What do you mean, Clara?" She took a breath, her eyes darting to Mark, who now stood rigid, the confident facade cracking further. "I've watched as Mark and his friends belittled so many people. You think they're just rich kids having fun, but they dig deeper, they target those they see as weak. I heard them once planning the next time they cut someone down. It's sick." Jessica's pulse quickened as Clara spoke. This was the evidence and transparency she had yearned for. "What exactly did you hear?" Clara steeled herself, her voice gaining strength with each word. "They were laughing about a kid from a different school, someone they thought was beneath them. They talked about ruining his chances at a scholarship just for kicks. I couldn't believe I was hearing it, but I couldn't act then. I was just the cleaner." Jessica felt a surge of anger, not just for the targeted student, but for all of them, molded into figures in a game of social power. In that moment, she understood that Clara's experience was a mirror to her own struggles against silence and complicity. "You're not just a cleaner. You have a voice, and we need to hear it now," she urged. "Right?" Clara gave a hesitant smile, though worry plagued her features. "But what if they turn against me for saying this? I'm just here to work." Jessica faced her, the gravity of their situation weighing heavily in the air between them. "That's what they want, Clara. They want us to feel powerless. But we can take a stand. Together." Mark's face darkened, his mask of bravado fading. His body language shifted from aggression to something more defensive, as if he were anticipating a fight rather than maintaining control over the narrative. "Mark," Jessica pivoted, addressing him once more. "You're not invincible. Your reign ends here. It's time others understand the real damage you do. Will you continue to hide behind shame and privilege, or will you finally confront the truth?" The crowd murmured, restless energy vibrating through them. They had witnessed something profound. Jessica, who had once hesitated to take up space, had become a catalyst for rising above fear. As she pulled Clara into the spotlight beside her, she finally understood. This confrontation was more than personal. It was an opportunity to reshape the narrative, not just for herself, but for everyone overshadowed by their oppressors. Then Clara spoke again, voice trembling but powerful. "I'm not afraid anymore, Mark. You may have thought you could control everyone, but you can't silence us indefinitely." With each word, Jessica felt the weight of her fear dissipate, replaced by a fierce resolve. The fight was no longer a solitary venture. It was shared, resonating deeper than she had anticipated. Suddenly, Jessica realized this was merely the beginning of their journey. They had exposed Mark, but the reception of his truths loomed large. The faces in the crowd, some illuminated with support, others emboldened by skepticism, reminded her that what they faced was monumental. The tension in the room coiled tighter, the air thick with unspoken challenges. What would Mark do next? Would he retaliate, or could the truth finally hold him accountable? Regardless, she knew one thing. She was no longer a hesitant observer, but a warrior ready to redefine her narrative. As she locked eyes with Clara, the stage was set for a showdown, leaving Jessica with a new question. How far was she willing to go to ensure their voices wouldn't be silenced again? As the weight of Clara's declaration hung heavy in the air, Jessica felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and fear. This confrontation was more than a personal skirmish. It was a crucible designed to test her newfound strength. The adrenaline coursed through her veins, but doubt crept in too. Was she truly prepared for the ripple effect of these revelations? She stole a glance at Mark, who now stood awkwardly at the edge of the crowd, his bravado replaced by a shadow of uncertainty. The whispers began to swirl like a maelstrom around him, and Jessica sensed the shift, how swiftly the narrative could twist from one of supremacy to vulnerability. "Clara, stay close to me," Jessica commanded softly, her hand brushing against Clara's arm for reassurance. If they were going to dismantle Mark's facade, they had to stand resolute, a united front against the tide of intimidation. The murmurs escalated, revealing how embedded Mark's influence was, yet underlined by the cracks appearing in his armor. Jessica took a breath, steeling herself for the inevitable backlash. A wave of warmth spread through her as she realized that this fluid exchange of courage wasn't just about herself, it was empowering Clara too. "Let us talk about accountability," Jessica continued, her voice gaining clarity. "You've ruled with fear, but today we're calling out your actions. No more secrets." Mark's expression shifted, anger burning briefly, before confusion flickered across his features. He visibly grappled with the sudden weight of public scrutiny, and Jessica savored the moment like a drop of cool water on parched skin. But then, an icy realization slithered into her mind. What would come next? Mark was cornered, yes, but proverbial cornered animals were known to lash out with reckless fury. Would he use his resources to retaliate? The thought sent a chill racing down her spine. "Jessica," Clara whispered nervously, "what if he tries to ruin us for this? I can't afford to lose my job." The concern echoed Jessica's own internal monologue. This was not merely a test of moral fortitude, but a labyrinth they had stepped into, with consequences looming on every turn. "We will be okay, Clara," Jessica replied, attempting to quell the tempest of uncertainty swirling in her mind. "We've already made the first move. The truth has a way of rallying allies." Yet, deep down, the stakes felt perilously high. Her fight with Mark was rapidly morphing from a battle for herself into a struggle for anyone who had ever felt silenced. She needed to think strategically, not just emotionally. "Mark, do you genuinely believe that people will support you after all this?" Jessica called out, shaking her head. "You've perpetuated fear. But what happens when people find out that your power is a facade built on manipulation? Are you really ready for that exposure?" The audience's murmurs crescendoed, an unmeasured cacophony that solidified her belief that this moment was pivotal. Mark's face paled, and Jessica realized she had struck a chord. This was more than hesitation. Something fragile within him was breaking apart. Sensing an opening, she took a decisive step forward, infusing her voice with conviction. "Your privilege does not exempt you, Mark. You've played God with others' lives, and the truth isn't something you can erase with charm or wealth." Jessica could see the shift in the crowd, their eyes glued to Mark, questioning what kind of man he really was under his polished exterior. But even as she took a breath to continue her momentum, a sudden roar erupted from the throng. Distant but growing louder. Voices, people clamoring for justice or validation. The noise morphed into a collective call, and in that moment, Jessica felt an unmistakable realization emerge. This struggle wasn't merely about standing tall. It was about revealing just how much richness and depth there was in her own voice. Yet, as she relished in her discovery, she questioned the unearthly challenge ahead. With momentum building, how could she nurture this awakening without losing herself to the conflict at play? As anticipation tightened around her, she knew she was on the precipice of something much larger. Armed with clarity electric as the tension in the atmosphere, she asked herself one final, crucial question. Was she ready to strip away every layer misleading her from true empowerment? The answer loomed tantalizingly out of reach, echoing just beneath her thoughts, while the crowd thrummed with a palpable energy, waiting for her next move. The weight of expectation pressed against Jessica's chest as she prepared to dismantle Mark's carefully constructed narrative. She could feel the energy of the crowd seeping into her, tempering her fear with determination. Mark's visage morphed further into calculating fury. His eyes darted about, searching for an escape, a scapegoat. "Mark," she called out, her voice slicing through the growing noise. "You need to own your actions today. It's time to confront the truth behind your facade." The intensity of her tone reverberated in the air, infusing her words with a raw authenticity she hadn't known she possessed. It felt exhilarating, but Jessica grasped its fragility like venturing on a tightrope suspended over uncertain depths. Mark clenched his jaw, betraying the internal turmoil riling up within. With every second that passed, his facade weakened, revealing glimpses of the man buried beneath the arrogance. "You think you can orchestrate a coup here, Jessica? You'll regret this," he warned, but the tremor in his voice spoke louder than his threats. Jessica stepped forward again, each movement purposeful. Mark was threatening, but she couldn't let intimidation sway her mission. "Are you really going to resort to empty threats? This isn't just about you. It's about everyone you've manipulated and silenced. It's about justice." Her rhetoric sparked a hum in the crowd. They were shifting, leaning closer, their collective curiosity woven with a budding rebellion. But then a thought struck her, a realization that sent adrenaline spiking through her veins. How could she reinforce this burgeoning movement without losing herself in the battle? She needed more than just words. She needed actionable steps to empower her colleagues. "Look around you, Mark. Are you truly prepared to drag everyone down with you? Your empire thrones on the backs of others. For once, it's time to acknowledge their pain." Clara's words echoed within her mind. What if he tried to ruin us? As uncertainty flared up again, Jessica pushed it aside. The quest for empowerment wasn't about immaculate confidence. It was about navigating doubt with resilience. Suddenly, she remembered the struggles of her peers' real stories of oppression that had long been stifled. Everyone here has faced the repercussions of your ruthless control. People deserve a voice, including Clara and everyone else you've overlooked. Let us give them that opportunity today. There, amidst the swirling emotions, she found an anchor. Resilience was not solely her struggle. It grew from the strength of the community around them. The murmurs of uncertainty in the crowd began to taper off, replaced by murmurs of curiosity and solidarity. Jessica could sense what they needed. Her initiative could forge a pathway for others to step into their own power. She refused to block the energy surging through her from her connection to Clara and the crowd. She gathered them, one soul at a time, weaving their fears into a tapestry of strength. Let us create a space for dialogue, a platform where voices can rise unfiltered, she proposed, her tone shifting from confrontation to collaboration. Because we aren't alone in this fight. Change demands courage, and together we can cultivate that courage. Mark faltered, struggling for control. His environment was shifting beneath his feet. Jessica seized this moment, turning to those gathered. "Join me. Share your stories. Let the truth reveal the reality of what we've endured." The weight of her narratives holds more power than any weapon he could muster. She felt the pulse of authenticity drumming in her chest. Every truth spoken was a note in an emerging symphony of defiance. Yet doubts lingered. Could this newfound momentum be sustainable? How could she protect them if Mark retaliated? "Jessica, what if he retaliates?" Clara's voice broke through, the vulnerability explicit. Seeds of reassurance were necessary, but the reality remained stark. Mark had resources at his disposal. "No matter what he does, we're equipped with truth. It's our sharpest tool," Jessica replied, infusing conviction into her thoughts. The adrenaline surged once more, battling with fear and excitement. Bounding bravely forward, Jessica felt the tension shift, coalescing into a palpable urgency. They had access to a profound force. As the murmur of the crowd grew into a swell, she sent out an unyielding message. The rally against fear begins now. The time has come to face who we really are, unbreakable, untamed, and ready to forge a future that finally uplifts us all. But as those around her ignited into action, a new fear emerged. What unforeseen consequences awaited her? With Mark at the epicenter of this revelation, could he retaliate in ways she hadn't anticipated? The air crackled with possibilities, and Jessica felt a new tension settling in the space around her, a wild energy that demanded resolution. Jessica stood before the assembly, a thin film of sweat forming on her brow as she absorbed their collective energy. What had begun as her fight for dignity and acknowledgement had blossomed into a powerful call for unity among the voiceless. The air crackled with uncharted potential. "I stand here not just for myself, but for each of you," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Today, we embark on a transformative journey towards a future where our truths are no longer silenced." It was a pivotal moment, the wind shifting as she felt the tide of support swelling behind her. The silence hung in the air, but the faces of her peers sparkled with cautious hope. Jessica sensed the grip of intimidation loosening, replaced by a burgeoning belief in collective strength. "We can shape this narrative together," she continued, her heart racing with every emphatic word. Clara stood beside her, emboldened by Jessica's words. "We need a safe space where stories can be shared, where we reclaim our power. This isn't just about accountability. It's about healing," she added, reaffirming the solidarity blossoming between them. Mark's countenance darkened as he shifted uncomfortably at their joined testimony. "You think your little rebellion matters?" he scoffed, attempting to claw back at the control he was losing. "This will result in nothing but chaos." The crowd bristled at his derisive tone, and Jessica took a breath, knowing the importance of each moment. If chaos is what it takes to unveil the truth and create a brighter future, then so be it, she declared, her eyes glinting with resolve. "Stop the masquerade, Mark," Clara interjected, her voice unwavering. It was a reinforcement of Jessica's newfound courage. "You've hid behind a facade of privilege for too long. Today it all ends." With the truth echoing around them like an anthem, Jessica recalled her father's struggles, the legacy of hard work and resilience that shaped her identity. She realized her journey had not merely been about reclaiming her voice. It was about uplifting all those unseen, those pressed beneath the weight of ridicule and entitlement. Mark, now visibly shaken, found himself cornered. The dynamics of the room shifted palpably. Voices that once whispered in the shadows surged forth, filling the air with a saturation of truth. Each moment spent confronting Mark peeled away the layers of his facade, exposing vulnerability beneath it. "Your castle on the hill is made of our stories, our sacrifices," Jessica said, each word potent with purpose. She urged the crowd forward, their murmurs growing into increasingly audacious declarations. "Our lives matter. Our histories deserve recognition." Suddenly, a chorus of voices echoed through the hall, individuals stepping forward, all echoing Jessica and Clara's sentiment. "We are not silent anymore," they shouted, a refrain that surged through the gathering. Jessica felt invigorated. They were reclaiming their narrative, each person resonating with defiance that she had ignited. Mark's posture slumped, his bravado visibly crumbling as the truth enveloped him. A realization dawned: the stories of his privilege were being overshadowed by collective resilience. Jessica saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, which deep down signified defeat. "Face the truth, Mark," she said gently, recognizing the humanity within the moment. "We all have the power to redeem ourselves in the eyes of others. No one deserves to be defined by the past." Perhaps this confrontation wasn't about annihilation, but rather an opportunity for rebirth. Jessica realized that empowerment often lay in fostering connections, even with those who once embodied everything she despised. With that epiphany, she held space for Mark to respond. "I might have lost sight of the cost of my family's privilege," he stammered, the bravado in his voice replaced by introspection. It caught her by surprise, the first flicker of accountability. Jessica took a moment, feeling the weight of her father's lessons mingling with the winds of change swirling around her. Was it possible that even Mark could choose to embark on a journey toward growth and acknowledgement? "Understanding where we come from is a powerful step," she affirmed, noticing the shift in the crowd's energy as they processed the unfolding narrative. "We can harness our experiences for the greater good." Together, with each heartbeat, Jessica felt lighter, liberated by the truth shaping her life in this moment of collective catharsis. As Mark faced more than just Jessica's words, but a room full of voices fueled by determination, she felt a wave of satisfaction wash over her. Finally, she declared, "Together, we reclaim our stories. Together, we rewrite the ending." More than a challenge, it was an invitation, a rallying call for unity in a fractured world. In the aftermath of this confrontation, it became evident to Jessica that she had transformed. She had emerged from an unseen cleaner into an established force for truth, a beacon for others in their own quest for recognition and liberation. As the guests began to disperse, their claps echoed like thunderous applause, resonating with newfound solidarity and purpose. And in the quiet aftermath of that confrontation, perched on the edge of true fulfillment, Jessica acknowledged a personal achievement. She had not only found her voice, but had ignited a movement, a legacy she would carry with pride. Now was time for the audience to act. You need to subscribe now to witness stories of personal triumph and transformation. Leave a like now to support the algorithm and ensure everyone sees this. Comment your reactions. Your voice matters. And don't wait even one more second to share this impactful video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this empowering conclusion. Together, let us spread inspiration far and wide.